Hello, I'm JenS, the Supervisor of Professional Learning for Downingtown Area School District, and I am eager to share with you some information about our new differentiated supervision model. Before beginning, though, I really must recognize the work of our own Professional Development Committee. They worked very hard to develop this model last school year, and we hope that you will find it supportive and helpful for you, our most valuable resource. I will be sharing a lot of information with you today. In order to allow some time for processing, I have built in some opportunities for you to turn and talk to a neighbor. I've also sent you a link for feedback, so if you still have questions at the end of the presentation, you can send them using that link. We all know how tiring and rewarding teaching all day can be, so thank you very much for giving your attention to this presentation. I do hope it will make your work more efficient and more rewarding. So let's get started. Differentiated supervision. What is it? Well, it's a system that provides teachers with options for the kinds of supervision that they receive. It usually includes several supervision cycles, which sometimes include observation, teamwork, and individual work. Essentially, teachers rotate through cycles, completing different types of supervision activities in each cycle. So why are Pennsylvania districts implementing differentiated supervision now? Well, they're hoping it will solve two problems. Number one, not all teachers in Pennsylvania are alike, but their supervision process is. Number two, Pennsylvania has also just endorsed a more robust clinical supervision process, and they've acknowledged that this will take principals even more time to complete. So, as a solution, they've suggested that districts who don't already have them develop differentiated supervision models where teachers who have already shown that they are proficient with teaching can elect a different way of being supervised. So who developed this model? For Downingtown Area School District? Well, as I mentioned, it was our Professional Development Committee. This is a group of representatives that were selected by you, the DAEA membership, to serve on the committee. We actually divided into two subcommittees, and this particular subcommittee met 5 times over last school year. We reviewed the literature and the research to find out what differentiated supervision is. We looked at other models, including national and statewide models. We considered what Pennsylvania Department of Education told us was required and what they recommended. And then we drafted a plan. After gathering input, we finalized it, and now here we are presenting it to you. So what are some benefits of differentiated supervision? Well, the research says that teachers who participate enjoy an increased sense of professionalism. This means that they don't have to rely on a supervisor as a sole source of expertise. It also allows teachers to have more control over not only their supervision, but the professional development that they can receive as a result of that supervision. Additionally, differentiated supervision is better aligned to the various career stages that we experience. Teachers who are less experienced may benefit from more supervision. Teachers who are more experienced could benefit from a plan that does not include one-to-one supervision. Again, it eliminates this one-size-fits-all philosophy of supervision. So, what's the objective of differentiated supervision here in Downingtown? Well, it's the same objectives that we always have. We're going to improve student achievement, and we're going to work to improve our own practice through reflection. It also gives us a chance to participate in action research and to enhance our professional growth at a variety of stages. So a really important question to ask ourselves is, how will differentiated supervision change the way I'm supervised this year? Well, if you look at the table that's in front of you, you'll see on the left side some of our supervision practices from previous years. And on the right side, we have our new supervision practices with this new model. So, in the past, we didn't have any choice in our supervision process. But you'll notice that with this model, eligible faculty members do have some choice. Before, because there was no choice, every teacher was formally observed. Now, teachers who are eligible and choose to participate in a different process may not need to be formally observed. Before, the supervisor drove the process. Although we know everyone tries to be collaborative, it was still in the supervisor's hands. With this, it's up to the teachers themselves to agree on the work that they'll do together or the work they will pursue on their own. Before, our goal-setting processes and forms may have varied across the buildings, but by creating this model, we've been able to standardize what teachers and supervisors will be doing in buildings across the district. You'll notice also that there are 2 goals that were required before for all teachers. Here, if you choose one of the other cycles, you may only pursue 1 goal. Before, teachers used to write those goals themselves. Here, they'll still have that option, but every year, the district will provide a pre-packaged plan that is already aligned to the district's professional development as well as the district's initiatives. And people who choose and are eligible to participate can simply become a part of that team project rather than write one on their own. Of course, they can always write one on their own as well. Now, another difference is that in the past we've always used paper forms. We're pretty excited that we are going to be putting all of these forms on an electronic system called Oasis, and you'll learn more about that at our next Connect Team meeting. One thing that won't change, however, is that just like we were before, we will continue to be rated on all 4 of Danielson's domains, including planning and preparation, classroom environment, instruction, and professionalism. So I've been using a few terms that may require some definition. The first is the term cycle. What is a cycle? Well, basically, it's a process. Each year, eligible teachers will choose which cycle they'd like to participate in. And once their principal approves, they'll complete whatever the activities are that are unique to that specific cycle. So what are those cycles for us? Well, after much research and looking at other plans and requirements, PDC recommended the following 3 cycles. The first is clinical supervision. This is exactly what we're all used to. You schedule an observation with your principal, there's a pre-observation conference, an observation, and a post-observation conference. Maybe your principal doesn't schedule them ahead of time, so you just have an observation and a post-observation conference. Well, this is still cycle 1. You write your own goals and participate with observation. Then we have cycle 2. Cycle 2 does not have observation as part of its process. Rather, a self-selected team gets together and creates an action plan or chooses to participate in the prepackaged action plan offered by the district. And they work together, and their completion of that plan is what will be used for their rating at the end of the school year. PDE did have one requirement when it came to these plans. They said they can't be book clubs. So we'll go through and give you some ideas about what they can be as we go on. Finally, the third cycle is a self-directed cycle. Again, this is not a cycle that includes observation. Rather, instead of working with a team, an individual may develop an action plan that he or she wishes to pursue in place of that observation that will count for their evaluation. This particular option is not available yet, but it will be available next school year, 2014-15. So, what's an action plan? Good question. It's a fairly vague term, but PDE does recommend that an action plan be include something like action research or maybe a group project. There is something that it requires, however. Action plans must be connected to all 4 of Danielson's domains. So you can't have a project or a goal that really only has to do with planning or only has to do with instructional delivery. Because you're going to be rated on all 4 domains in the end, you have to have a project that includes all 4 domains in the beginning. Okay, so here's some time for you to do a little digestion. Take a look at the graphic that's in front of you. It includes all 3 of those cycles and the steps that are required to complete them. I'm going to ask you and someone sitting near you to take a few minutes to come up with some similarities and some differences among the cycles. Let's take maybe about 2-3 minutes. Go ahead and press pause. When you're ready, come back to me. Okay, so I'm hoping you had a chance to talk about similarities and differences. You may have found more, but I figured I'd go over just a couple of them that come up when we discuss them. The first is, you notice that of the similarities, or of the steps, that everybody has to complete this notice of intent. We'll take a look at that form in just a minute. Everyone also has to do goal setting or action planning, and everyone does a mid and an end of year reflection. So no matter what cycle you do, you complete the same forms. As we mentioned before, everyone's rated using those 4 Danielson domains. You may have seen others, but those are sort of the biggies. Now let's go and look at differences among cycles. The main difference is formal observation. As we mentioned, in cycle 1, there is formal observation. In cycles 2 and 3, there isn't. Now, does that mean that your principal will never show up in your classroom? Of course not. We'll still have informal observations and whatever else happens in your school building as a matter of course. But it will not be the formal observation that's taken or that's used for your evaluation. Goals. As you noticed, in cycle 1, there are 2 goals. In cycles 2 and 3, just 1. The actual actions that are required are a little different too. You'll be the one writing the plan if you do cycle 1. You can choose to opt into the prepackaged plan if you choose cycle 2. Cycle 3, you'll be working on your own plan as well. Here's another big difference, and one we hope will make your life a little easier. Cycle 2 will always have a pre-packaged action plan. As I mentioned, that will be aligned to what the district is already doing. So if you opt for that cycle, a lot of the work that you do will be integrated into our professional development program. Availability differs as well. We're going to start with cycle 1 being available to everyone this year. Cycle 2 will be available, but in modified form. We're only going to have people participate in their pre-packaged plan this year. The idea there is to help people get an idea of what this looks like for 1 year, and then the next year after they've experienced it, they can write their own plans, if they choose. Cycle 3 won't be available until 2014-15. There was also one last piece, reflection. For cycle 1, Pennsylvania Department of Education does not require that anyone share their reflections. However, they said if you're going to have people participate in something like cycles 2 or 3, then they would have to share their reflections with some kind of professional learning community. Notice they said you don't have to share your results, just your reflections on the process. We've actually already built that time in for you during our May professional development. Okay, so who's eligible? Who can participate in each cycle? Let's take a look at this chart. In clinical supervision, anyone can participate. All teachers have that option. Certain teachers are required to participate, however, and this also comes from Pennsylvania Department of Education. Number 1, teachers who are non-tenured, teachers who are new to their position in Downingtown Area School District, teachers who their principal just recommends it for them, or teachers who may have been considered at risk. How do we define at risk? Well, however we've always defined it. If you found that you've ever worked on an improvement plan, while you were doing it, you would be in cycle 1. Cycle 2, who's eligible? Well, any tenured teacher is eligible to participate. You do have to have had 1 year prior of a satisfactory rating. Cycle 3, again for tenured teachers, but this time your satisfactory ratings would have had to come in the previous 3 years. So, how does this impact your evaluation? Well, depending on which cycle you choose, you're either going to have evidence that's gathered from observations that's rated with Danielson's domains, or evidence that's gathered from the action plan that's rated in Danielson's domains. That will be combined with whatever other evidence is collected throughout the school year, and it will be used to formulate a final evaluation. We learned about that back in August, and that includes 2 pieces, the Danielson domains as well as the student data. So, I wonder if you're thinking, I may choose to participate here, but if I do, how will I be supported? A couple of ways. I talked before about this sort of gradual release model. We're hoping that by offering first this year a prepackaged plan, people will get to know the program and understand its requirements. And then we'll sort of release it out, and people can either write their own team plan or they can write their own individual plan. If you choose to participate in the next 2 years, you'll also get a chance to provide feedback into the model. So when you're finished completing it, you can tell us what you think and we can make changes accordingly. Finally, in 2015-16, all 3 cycles will be released to everyone who is eligible. And we're hoping that people will still elect to participate in the prepackaged plans and feel comfortable creating their own. So another question came up for us, and it was a good one. Won't this be more work for me? Well, I'm not sure of the answer for that. I will tell you that we were hoping to reduce the amount of work required by teachers by offering these prepackaged plans. I will also tell you that the research we found was that teachers said that even if it was more work, they found the work to be more rewarding. And that's because they had some choice in what they were pursuing. And so maybe it will be more work, but we're hoping the work will be more meaningful, or maybe even you'll be able to not have as much work to do because it will be more efficient using this prepackaged plan. So what do I have to do? Well, we'll learn about the prepackaged action plans themselves and how to participate. But first, it's time to reflect again. Take a minute to turn to a different neighbor. This time, talk about whether or not you think Cycle 2 action plan is a good one, or maybe a good fit for you. Talk about whether Cycle 3 might be a good fit for you, or if you think Cycle 1's your bet. Share any questions or thoughts you may still have. Let's just take maybe 3 minutes to do that. I'll wait here. Press play when you're ready. Okay, so now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What are these action plans and what do these forms look like? You should have in front of you the forms that are appropriate for whatever you teach or whatever your position is in Downingtown Area School District. Everybody take a look at step 1. We all have the same step 1 of 4. It's the notice of intent. Take a look at it and ask yourself these questions. What do I have to do with this form? What does my principal have to do with this form? And what happens next? Go ahead, take a look. I'll wait. All right, so what do you have to do with this form? Well, you can see you just select which of the cycles you would like to participate in. So your principal then has to say whether or not that meets with his or her suggestion, approve it, and send it back to you. If he or she recommends something different, they would just write comments down in the section at the bottom, and then you could revamp the notice of intent and resubmit it with the recommended changes. So what happens next? Well, for everyone, we move to the goal setting and the action plan. Go ahead and take a look at that document. It's step 2 of 4. Ask yourselves these questions. What do you have to do with this form? How are Danielson's 4 domains incorporated? What does your principal have to do with this form? And what happens next? So you can see what you have to do with this form is actually come up with and write 2 SMART goals, and then you take it through the process of the goal setting. So you say, what is your timeline? What are the benchmarks you're hoping to reach? You say how you think this will impact student achievement or students and benefit them. You talk about what resources you might need, and then you get your principal to approve it. Again, if he or she has any comments, they'll be written on the form. You can make any changes that need to be made. And then what happens next? You go ahead and pursue your goals and complete your action plan. Cycle 1 does involve an observation. Just to review, this process starts with a pre-observation conference. Principals can choose from a bank of questions that are based on Danielson's Domain 1, planning and preparation. The teacher then shares the lesson and they schedule the observation. Now, not all principals will choose to schedule observations, and if they don't, that's fine. We will all be observed using the same observation form, and then we will all still participate in a post-observation conference. Here, principals will choose from a bank of questions which include those that are designed to fit in with Danielson's Domain 4, professionalism. Teachers also will have the opportunity to provide their own reflections and maybe add some evidence that they think is helpful in order to evaluate that particular observation. Finally, principals will rate the observation overall based on the Danielson rubric that's included with the new Act 82 of 2012, which includes the new teacher evaluation requirements. Take a look at these questions just to get an idea of the types of questions you may be asked to answer if you participate in an observation cycle. Okay, so now let's look at step 2 if we were to participate in cycle 2. Here's where you may have different forms. Encore teachers and secondary teachers may have a form that has to do with formative assessment. Elementary teachers and middle school math teachers have a different form because your plans are different, because your professional development is different. Take a look and ask yourself these questions. What do I have to do with this form? How does this prepackaged plan fit with what I was going to do anyway this year? What does my principal have to do with this form? And what happens next? This one's going to take a little longer to discuss. Take a few minutes. I'll be waiting here. So as you can see, the prepackaged action plan has a lot of information in there that you don't have to create. Instead, you may have to fill in topics or numbers and of course your own name and subject, but it doesn't require you to come up with a whole plan yourself. Again, principals still need to approve this plan, make sure that they agree with how you filled out the form, and then what happens next? Well, you pursue your action plan with your team. Next, we have 2 more, our mid-year reflection and our end-of-year reflection. Everybody has the same form for this because everyone does the same thing. There are a few items of interest on these forms. They're pretty much the same. There's one additional question on the end-of-year reflection. There is a question, do I have to meet with my principal to actually discuss my mid-year and my end-of-year reflection? Well, that just depends. Your principal will let you know whether or not an actual meeting is necessary or whether simply handing in the paperwork will suffice. You'll notice in the mid-year reflection, it asks you to talk about what evidence could be gathered, and you could include data and evidence at that time, but it's not required. At the end of the year, you will need to document how well you achieved your goal. Speaking of which, there's a section there that talks about reflection and whether you completely or partially or not at all completed this goal. It's important that you know that your evaluation is not based on whether or not you complete the goal as stated. Rather, it's about the whole process and the evidence that you were able to collect. If at any time you're finding that your action plan is no longer fitting what you're doing in the classroom, you simply meet with your principal and let him or her know about changes that you'd like to make. Together you can collaborate on an effective way to make those changes. So, we've had a lot of information presented today, and it will take a little while to sink in. Here are some main points. When it comes to differentiated supervision, it really can provide some advantages. The first is choice. The second is freedom to develop your own plan and autonomy over it. But the really nice thing is that it's coupled with the third thing, which is support, so that you're not out there trying to come up with ideas on your own. There will be some support for you every year in the form of that prepackaged action plan. And then finally, that action plan is aligned with our initiatives that we're already pursuing here. So we're hoping that differentiated supervision looks like a choice that makes sense for all of us. What's next? Well, on September 5th, you will be learning more about the Danielson domains themselves and how people who are participating in Cycle 1 will be rated using those domains. That's coming up next. After that, at our Connect Team meeting, we'll learn a little bit more about this electronic form system called OASIS. Not to worry, it's connected with My Learning Plan, so we already know how to log in and get around in that site. And then by September 15th, teachers will have to choose which cycle they'd like to participate in and submit the correct paperwork. So, I want to leave you with a final note, and it has to do with the quote that's right in front of you. Henry Adams said, "A teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops." Truer words were never spoke. You have no idea the impact you have on those around you, not only today, but for years to come. I just want to say how much we appreciate the work that you do, and we really want all of this to be meaningful for you. So we hope having these choices and being able to participate in this cycle can be something that is rewarding, helps make your jobs easier, and helps us all become even better educators. Thanks so much for your time.